Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the business license hearing of November 23rd, 2021. This is a business license hearing regarding the revocation of a business license that was issued to Al-Karim Kaki of Planet Rock. And before we begin this morning's proceedings, I have some opening remarks. Please note that this hearing is convened by electronic means, as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw of the City of Vancouver Electronic Meetings. And as such, panel members may participate in person or by electronic means. Please note, if my connection is lost during any portion of this meeting, we will recess the meeting until my connection is restored. If a council member attending by electronic means loses connection during the voting process, staff are available to get you back online quickly while that voting process is suspended. And staff contact information has been circulated to you, panel members. Video of council members speaking and the vote results will be projected on the live stream when available. And for council members that are participating by electronic means, in accordance with section 14.13 of the procedure bylaw, please do ensure your video is turned on and let the clerks know if you leave the meeting for the purposes of maintaining quorum. Also like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and we thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to continuing to work with them in partnership as we build this great city together. So, clerk, can we have the roll call, please?
Good morning. Councillor Kirby-Young is present as chair. Councillor Fry? Present. Councillor Hardwick?
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, clerk. Okay, so in terms of the order of proceedings, we will begin this morning's business license hearing, commencing with opening remarks from Robert Leblanc, acting as counsel for the City of Vancouver. Just a sec, let me make sure your mic is on. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Robert Leblanc. I am I'm litigation counsel with Legal Services for the city and hold the title of city prosecutor. I have conduct of the proceedings this morning on behalf of the city. I'm just going to pause now and note that across council chamber here, I see counsel on behalf of Mr. Kaki, and who I think is Mr. Kaki, sitting to her right. So I'm just going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Counsel for Al-Karim Kaki.
Sorry, can you just repeat your name? We didn't have your microphone turned on.
Alice Wynn. I'm appearing on behalf of Mr. Kaki, Al-Karim Kaki, the sole proprietor of Planet Rock.
Okay, we can carry on then?
Yes, please.
Thank you. This hearing this morning is before the panel to consider the recommendation of the city's chief license inspector to revoke the business license for Mr. Kaki, who is carrying on business as Planet Rock at the address of 1051 Granville Street. That recommendation by the chief license inspector, and the basis therefore, is set out in her letter of October 1st, 2021 to the licensee. That's included in the evidence materials that are before the panel at tab 8. And I'm just going to take an opportunity to read the two first paragraphs at the top of the second page of that letter as a preamble to entering into these proceedings. The determination of the chief license inspector was that after reviewing the information provided to me by Vancouver Coastal Health and the Vancouver Police Department, as well as your previous business license suspension, I have concluded that you are operating your business with a total disregard for the laws and acts in which you are required to operate, and has created a drain on city and police resources. In addition to this, I am of the opinion that your business practices are harmful and dangerous to the health and safety of youths. Therefore, it is my opinion that you are guilty of such gross misconduct in or with respect to the operation of your business that, pursuant to Section 278 of the Vancouver Charter, I am referring your business license to a business license hearing with a recommendation to have your business license revoked. At the hearing, a panel of 3 city council members will determine whether or not your business license ought to be revoked. Now, Mr. Kaki is the holder of a 2021 business license to carry on trade as a retail dealer of gifts and novelties under the name Planet Rock. This retail store is located in the city's downtown core within the Granville Street Entertainment District. Among other things, the store's website advertises itself as a smoke and vapor shop that sells smoke and vaping merchandise and paraphernalia, including things like bongs, scales, knives, cannabis seeds, and snack food. At tab 3 of the evidence book, the city has included some screen grabs of the website, which I happened to visit yesterday afternoon and can confirm that this is the information that is still up. It includes photographs of cannabis seeds being offered for sale, snack foods, bongs, and knives. There's also a photograph of the front of the premises with the trade name Planet Rock above the front window and door with a banner indicating that cannabis seeds are for sale. I should note that at no time has the licensee possessed a city business license authorizing him to carry on business as a cannabis retailer. The evidence book before the panel documents numerous and ongoing complaints from the public regarding the sale of vaping tobacco and cannabis products to minors at Planet Rock since April 2017. Those complaints were made in most cases by concerned parents and educators and public workers engaged with youth whose underage children and students were able to purchase such items from the shop unlawfully. The complaints were submitted to both Vancouver Coastal Health and the Vancouver Police, with each agency undertaking their own investigations and enforcement efforts. In the case of Vancouver Coastal Health, they undertook regular compliance checks that resulted in ticketing and warning notices issued to the business and the licensee. In the case of VPD, they undertook undercover surveillance that led to the execution of a search warrant at the premises and the subsequent seizure of cannabis products, such as pre-rolled joints, edibles like gummies, brownies, and cookies, and seed products. In the case of both enforcement agencies, the sale of such cannabis vaping and vaping products to minors was observed. Collectively, both agencies referred their investigations to the city's chief license inspector for consideration. After consideration of the submissions of Vancouver Coastal Health and the Vancouver Police Department, and taking into account a previous license suspension from 2011, and also the submissions of the licensee received during an interview conducted on July 15th of this year, the Chief License Inspector has now referred the question of the business license to this panel with a recommendation to revoke it. The evidence before the panel in support of that recommendation consists of the evidence book of the city that is now before the panel, and the evidence of 3 witnesses who will take the panel through the documents in the evidence book and explain their concerns with respect to the ongoing operation of the business. Those 3 witnesses in order this morning are Kevin Kouris. Mr. Kouris is a supervisor of inspections with Vancouver Coastal Health. We also have Detective Constable Timothy Rich of the Vancouver Police Department, who was responsible for the undercover operation. And we have our Chief License Inspector, Sarah Hicks. But before embarking on their evidence, some procedural matters should be noted. The Council's power to review a business license is set out in Section 275 of the Vancouver Charter. That section states that the granting or refusing of a license to an applicant, therefore, and the revocation or suspension of a license which has been granted shall be deemed to be in the discretion of Council, and Council may grant, refuse, revoke, or suspend the license without stating any reasons therefore, save in respect of a licensee who by reasonable efforts cannot be found. And Council shall not revoke a license without giving the holder thereof an opportunity to be heard. And of course, this morning is Mr. Kaki's opportunity to be heard. Under that section, though, this panel has broad powers to revoke, suspend, or uphold a business license. Now, often these matters come before this panel as an alternative type of enforcement in the form of a suspension. The suspension power is delegated to the Chief License Inspector, who can issue a suspension summarily. Some notes in Section 277 excuse me, are helpful to point out because they bear consideration by this panel on the matter that's before it today. Section 277 of the Charter indicates that the Chief License Inspector shall have power at any time summarily to suspend for such period as he or she may determine any license if the holder of the license is convicted of any offense under any statute of Canada or of the province of British Columbia, is convicted of any offense under any bylaw of the city with respect to the business, trade, profession, or other occupation for which he is licensed, or with respect to the relevant premises. And I think most importantly, has, in the opinion of the inspector, been guilty of such gross misconduct in or with respect to the licensed premises as to warrant the suspension of the license. And also has, in the opinion of such official, sold, offered for sale, displayed for sale, or distributed to a person actually or apparently under the age of 16 years anything that may be harmful or dangerous to the health or safety of a person actually or apparently under the age of 16 years. Now, I point this out because the Chief License Inspector first has used that same type of language in the letter that is now referred to Counsel for consideration of the revocation with respect to gross misconduct and concern with respect to the harmful or dangerous effects on the health and safety of youths. But I also pointed out because the Chief License Inspector does not have the authority to summarily revoke a business license, only the authority to suspend a business license. And of course, we are here this morning because the Chief License Inspector in this case considers the evidence that this panel is going to hear to be egregious to the point that a suspension is simply insufficient to deal with the concerns that she raises. Now, with respect to the procedure, that is outlined in Section 278 of the Vancouver Charter. The procedure this morning under that section indicates that the Chief License Inspector may in any case recommend to Counsel in writing the suspension or revocation of any license, setting out the reasons for such recommendation. The Counsel shall not suspend or revoke the license without previous notice and an opportunity to be heard being given to the holder thereof. As I noted earlier, I'm going to ask this panel to repeatedly refer to consideration of the Chief License Inspector's reasons for her recommendation as set out in her letter of October 1st. So in consideration of that recommendation, the issues that this panel may consider are broad and may include consideration of whether the management of and the activities of the business amounts to gross misconduct, whether the business is being responsibly run in keeping with Council's expectations of its corporate citizens. Has it been so in the past, and will it be so in the future? You can consider the impact that the business has on the local community. You can ask, has the licensee conducted himself in a way that may be harmful or dangerous to the health or safety of the youth in the city? And you can ask, has the licensee conducted himself in a way that has created a drain on police and city resources? In these hearings, this is an administrative hearing, the rules of natural justice apply, so I will ask the panel to be mindful of the fact that the license holder is entitled to hear the allegations against him this morning. He may respond to those allegations. He may ask questions of the city's witnesses, and he may provide evidence on his own behalf. And after hearing all of the evidence that's going to be presented to you this morning, if you see fit to revoke the business license or place restrictive conditions on the license, you must give reasons for the suspension or revocation of the license in the same way that the Chief License Inspector has in her letter of October 1st. So that's the initial comments that I have. The order of proceedings indicate that next we shall move to the testimony of the City of Vancouver witnesses, beginning with direct examination by myself. So if we can move in that direction, I'm going to ask that the representative here this morning from Vancouver Coastal Health please approach the witness stand. Thank you. If you could please introduce yourself, sir.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Curris. I'm the supervisor of the Tobacco and Vapor Products Compliance Program at Vancouver Coastal Health.
Thank you, Mr. Curris. How long have you been employed by Vancouver Coastal Health?
Approximately 16 years.
And in your present capacity, how long have you held that?
3.5 years.
And can you tell the panel a synopsis, perhaps, of what your duties involve?
Our program ensures compliance with respect to the Tobacco and Vapor Products Control Act and regulation. Through the Ministry of Health, we are mandated to conduct a specific number of inspections, whether it be educational inspections, which we call routine inspections, or we carry out a minor test shopping program. So we have approximately 9 minor test shoppers aged 16 to 18 years old that we send into all stores in the Vancouver Coastal Health catchment area to test their compliance and making sure that they are asking identification when selling these specific products that are age restricted.
And of course, those age-restricted products are set out in the regulations that you're responsible for enforcing.
Correct.
And can you just provide the panel with some information as to what those age restrictions are and what products they apply to?
So in the province of British Columbia, to purchase tobacco and vapor products, one must be 19 years of age or older.
Now, you're here today with respect to a business being run by the name of Planet Rock at 1051 Granville Street. I understand you're familiar with this particular business.
Correct.
And you have provided in the evidence package that's before the panel a synopsis of the compliance checks and investigation and enforcement activity by your agency with respect to the business at 1051 Granville Street.
Correct.
Just for the panel's information, that is the synopsis that's noted as being under tab 4. Do you have a copy of that before you, sir?
I do.
Thank you. If you could just explain to the panel how this synopsis came to be and what it's detailing for us.
Okay. So I was contacted by the Vancouver Police Department originally by Detective Craig Reynolds, which connected me with Tim Rich. Some information was brought to our attention due to the specific products that fall under our legislation being sold at Planet Rock. We've had an ongoing history with Planet Rock. I basically provided a history timeline of my transition from district officer, which I was Planet Rock's district inspector prior to 2017, and laid out basically my time as a supervisor because the complaints get filtered towards me. So I would then take those complaints and assign them to the current district officer. So what I did here is I basically did a history timeline of any sort of complaints, educational sessions, any sort of minor test shopping inspection passes and fails. Going through the timeline from November 2017 to April 2021, we had received 9 complaints. All those complaints were sales to minors. It was concerning to me because of the age, the information that we were receiving, the age of the individuals purchasing these products at the specific store. Like I mentioned before, one must be 19 years or older to purchase these products, but we were receiving complaints that as young as 13-year-olds were purchasing from this specific retailer. In terms of our program, Planet Rock had 4 minor test shop passes. So that would be when when a minor gets sent in, they're actually either asked for identification or just asked to leave the store. And they had 4 minor test shopping fails. Out of those 4 fails, 2 resulted in violation tickets for sales to minor to the sole proprietor, Mr. Kaki.
Can you just explain to the panel how the test shopper program works?
Absolutely.
And if you want to make reference to some of the inspection notes that are contained under tab 5, please feel free to do that, but just note which date report you're referring to.
Okay, so with our test shopping program, what we do is we have over 700 tobacco and or vapor retailers. So we break those down into districts. We could be checking anywhere from 20 to approximately 30 facilities that sell tobacco and vapor products. Again, we do have a roster of minor test shoppers aged 16 to 18 years old. So I would set out and go out with 2 minor test shoppers, and Planet Rock would be one of 20 to 25 stores that we're checking that evening. The same instructions are given for every single store. We park as close as we can just for safety reasons, just to keep an eye on the minor as they're entering the store. If they're successful in purchasing the product, they come back to the vehicle, they write their report as to what happened during the transaction. And then at that time, the officer would use their discretion on whether to enter the store to issue any sort of warnings or violation tickets, or again, with using discretion, if they choose not to, a later date would be attempted to be set with Mr. Kareem to issue any sort of violations.
So I note in your synopsis at tab 4 that there were those 4 fails. Now, the information that's collected by the minor that goes into the store, that's then shared with the Vancouver Coastal Health inspector who's supervising their activities.
Correct.
And that includes descriptions of the individual who sold them the product.
Correct.
As well as obviously the nature of the product.
Yes.
Now, in those 4 cases, it looks like you've noted dates as being fails in your synopsis. We have a failed compliance check on November 24th, 2017 noted. A failed compliance check March 27th, 2019. Fail is noted. Compliance check June 19th, 2019. A failed compliance check is noted. And I think I missed March 27th, 2019. A failed compliance check is noted. And with respect to 2 of those incidents, a violation ticket was issued?
Correct.
Can you tell the panel what that violation ticket was for?
Sure. So Mr. Kaki is a sole proprietor for the business Planet Rock, which makes it slightly complicated at times. Those tickets need to be issued directly to that sole proprietor versus, say, a corporation where a ticket could be issued to a director, manager, assistant manager, basically a person in charge at that time. Mr. Kaki, in my dealings with Mr. Kaki, he was rarely at the store, making it difficult to issue these violation tickets. So after the sales would occur, the 2 resulting in tickets actually resulted in separate meetings with Mr. Kaki to issue those tickets directly to him. So the first ticket was actually issued by myself directly to Mr. Kaki, came to our office at 601 West Broadway, and a ticket for sales to minor was issued to him at that time. The second violation ticket, Mr. Kaki met the current district officer, Officer Rathbun, I believe in Port Coquitlam, where Mr. Kaki resides.
And now, with respect to the violation tickets, you also indicated that education was a component of your inspection activities?
Correct. So like I mentioned before, through the Ministry of Health, we are mandated to provide routine inspections, which are also known as educational sessions, to all our tobacco and vapor retailers. our mandate is actually only one of these routine inspections per facility, but Vancouver Coastal Health has doubled that. So throughout the year, we do provide them with a specific inspection with that emphasis on educating the retailer on what they need to know in order to sell these products in British Columbia. Again, with my dealings with Mr. Kaki, rarely at the store. So these educational sessions are more effective when dealing with the owner or a deemed manager at the store. But there was no, there always seemed to be a turnover in staff there. So these are unscheduled inspections. So the officer would just show up, and whoever happens to be at that store, we run through our program with them. We leave them our business card, informational pamphlets, and then would ask the ownership and or management to get a hold of us. So that's how typically it works.
I'm just looking at the very last inspection report that was completed by Mr. James Rathbun. This is the last inspection report under tab 5 for an inspection dated October 4th, 2019. First, can I just ask, who is James Rathbun? His name seems to be on the majority of these reports.
Officer James Rathbun is the current district officer for the Granville Street area.
Okay. And I'm reading from his closing comments here in terms of his interactions with Mr. Kaki stemming from his investigation or inspection on that date. There's a note that a ticket was issued. And I also note towards the bottom of that inspection report that Mr. Kaki was advised that any further violations could potentially lead to a business license review with the City of Vancouver. That warning was given to him by Mr. Rathbun at that time.
Correct.
And that was back in 2019.
Correct.
Now, there's also an indication at the bottom of your summary, back to tab 4, with respect to an April 29th, 2021 complaint investigation, where there was a discussion or discuss sales to minor complaints. And I'm reading from your notes because you produced this. During the inspection, the tobacco enforcement officer noticed prohibited e-juice for sale. The store owner, Al, said he would stop selling vapor products by the end of March. Do you know who that was told to?
Mr. Kaki?
Mr. Kaki said that. Did he say that to one of the inspectors?
To Mr. Rathbun.
And so moving forward from April 29th, 2021, it would have been your agency's understanding that Mr. Kaki was no longer going to sell vapor products out of Planet Rock, and that would hopefully solve the problem.
Correct. One thing I'd like to add, in November of 2019, basically the requirements to sell these products in the province of British Columbia changed. What needs to be done now is a notice of intent. So basically informing the Ministry of Health that you plan on selling vapor products is a requirement for anyone selling vapor products. This is something that Mr. Kaki has not done for the store. So really anything that Officer Rathbun saw during his inspection would be deemed non-compliant. So things have changed slightly. So that's where the agreement was made that Mr. Kaki said he would no longer be selling these products anymore because it is a rigorous procedure to actually submit all this information to the Ministry of Health.
Okay. Thank you for that. I just want to talk about Mr. Kaki's representations to Mr. Rathbun on April 29th, 2021, saying that he would stop selling vapor products by the end of March. I understand that there was a compliance check earlier this fall on October 1st, 2021.
Correct.
And the results of that compliance check are noted at the back of the evidence package under tabs 9 and 10. Do you have a copy of that report?
I do.
With you? Can you tell the panel what happened on October 1st, 2021 during that compliance check?
Okay, so again, this is speaking for Officer Rathbun. Mr. Rathbun spoke with, I don't want to mention their name, but spoke with a staff member at Planet Rock and basically told the facility currently has not submitted their required notice of intent that is needed to sell vapor products. So the minor test, there was a failed minor test shop, so the minors informed Mr. Rathbun that the employee had, my apologies. Sorry, so basically the employee went to the back room to pick up the vapor products to give to the minor test shopper. The information was accurate, as I could see, and there was no vapor products when James went back into the store. So no display, so that's typically what we see when we go into these shops. They have somewhat of a power wall display of vapor products, other products that are available to be purchased. But in this particular case, the employee at Planet Rock went to the back room to get this vapor product. So James reviewed the events that happened, that took place, that resulted in the sales to minors, and reiterated the importance of verifying a vapor purchaser's age by requesting and checking valid photo ID. James asked the employee why he had sold vapor products from the back room, and he was unaware that it was illegal to sell any vapor products that had not been declared with the Ministry of Health.
Okay. So just backing up again to Mr. Kaki's representations on April 29th, 2021, as of that date, there had been multiple complaints as indicated in your inspection reports from members of the public, including parents, educators, and persons involved with youth, correct? As of that April date, there had been 2 violation tickets issued.
Correct.
As of that April 29th, 2021 date, there had been 4 failed compliance checks.
Correct.
As of that date, there had been warnings given to Mr. Kaki with respect to the ongoing unlawful sale to minors of vaping products.
Correct.
And yet, following April 29th, 2021, there was a 5th failed compliance check on October 1st, 2021.
Correct.
Not only was it a failed compliance check, there was a sale to a minor, and the sale appeared to be a sale of the vaping products, appeared to be being done surreptitiously by hiding or keeping that product in the back stock room.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Can you just comment, Mr. Couros, generally on the purpose of these regulations and the prohibitions against the sale to minors?
Like I mentioned before, our main priority is as restricting access for youth potentially obtaining these hazardous, if not used properly, hazardous products. Like I mentioned before, we take pride in education. Pre-pandemic, we were at a 93% compliance rate with all our tobacco and vapor retailers. So again, everything that we do is work with progressive enforcement because we want to work together with our retailers to achieve that common goal of compliance. But with this particular retailer, just in my years of experience, obtaining information, whether it's through complaints, through word of mouth, these kids that we employ are 16 and 18 years old, and just listening to them talk in the back seat, and I mean, schools know that this is where you go, and people are taking public transit to go and purchase these products. So, from the specific retailer. So for me, we take pride in making sure that we try to be that roadblock for youth accessing these products. But the reality is we are just a roadblock. Kids are persistent, and they're going to get what they want and try as many times. So, we do our best making sure to increase volumes of checks based on complaints or failed checks or things like that. But again, this is a unique retailer that has interesting hours of operation. So it is a challenging file for Vancouver Coastal Health. So I do feel that, we've done our best and tried to maintain compliance, but due to the volume of complaints we're receiving from the public, it's almost impossible to keep on top of.
Maybe I'll just ask you to elaborate a little bit on the types of resources that your agencies had to expend with respect to, over the years, trying to get compliance
Absolutely.
with this particular licensee?
Okay, so with legislation, I mean, I think it could be very difficult to interpret what legislation is and how it's applied in one store. You know, could you repeat that, sorry, one more time?
Yeah, no, I'm asking you to give the panel a sense of the amount of resources that your agencies had to invest in enforcement and trying to get compliance with respect to this particular retailer or licensee.
Like I just mentioned before too, so what we would do is if there was an increase in sales or complaints, we would, you know, we would focus, extra time would be given to deal with a specific facility, whether it's following up with the complainant, providing, you know, initial inspection due to the complaint with follow-up. What we do is we actually created an educational pamphlet. So to go online and to look at legislation, you know, how old do you have to be to purchase these products? Simple questions like that. You know, navigating through a website can be difficult for some. So what we did is we created an actual resource for these retailers to keep in their stores to basically hit on the main points, which are sales to minors, advertisement, and display issues. So not specifically to Al, but just to make it a little easier for all retailers in British Columbia to have a full understanding of what's needed of them to sell these products is something that we took an extra step with.
I'm just going to close by asking you, considering your knowledge of this particular retailer, the history of enforcement by your inspectors, your dealings with Mr. Kaki, do you have any faith that moving forward, this particular business being operated as it is going to be able to cease selling these types of goods to minors?
Unfortunately, I do not. I do not have any faith. I mean, I like I said, I have 16 years working at Vancouver Coastal Health. Of those 16 years, I've had the ability to work in all our districts. So I can't speak to the full 16 years of my career with Vancouver Coastal Health, but my direct dealings and my dealings with this specific file as the program supervisor, just my concern with the volume of complaints, aside from what Vancouver Coastal Health conducts in terms of inspections throughout the years, that to me alone, having 9 complaints in a 3.5, 4 year time frame is alarming. And the age that I'm hearing, when I hear 13-year-olds purchasing these products, it's a huge concern to me. And I mean, there's nothing that's been done on Planet Rock / Mr. Kaki's side to show improvements. Again, we're always willing to work with our retailers. So sometimes, it does take, it just takes the operator to pick up a phone and to call us and, ask for extra resources, ask us for an extra inspection, but those things have never been done. So no, I do not have any faith in that.
Thank you. Those are the city's questions for the witness, Mr. Kouros. Counsel for Mr. Kaki now has an opportunity to ask you questions. I'd ask that you cooperate with that. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, try it now. Your mic's on now.
Are you able to hear me with the mask on, or do I need
yes,
to take
we
it
can,
off?
if you
Okay.
prefer to keep it on.
Perfect. Just a few questions, Mr. Kirk. How are your complaints received? Are they by phone or email?
So they can be by phone, or we have a general VCH line that would get filtered. If it's a tobacco or vapor complaint, it would get filtered to my email.
And generally, are you receiving complaints by email or by phone?
I would say the majority of them are through our general line.
And who documents these complaints?
The documentation would be done by the district inspector. So if a follow-up is done post complaint, for example, say James Rathbun is the current district officer. So if James were to receive a complaint, he would make efforts into contacting Mr. Kaki or a manager at the store to discuss the complaint that they received. And at that time, that would prompt them to provide them with a educational session.
And other than by phone, do you follow up with these complainants? Does anyone meet with them in person?
Depending on the particulars, a lot of our complainants prefer to remain anonymous, and it's more just information exchange.
So the identity of the complainants, it's never truly verified?
Some are not. It's up to the complainant.
And how do you verify their identification?
Unfortunately, when it's through phone, it's word of mouth and just confirmed by asking their name.
So it's just word of mouth. So essentially, I could call in and say, I have 3 kids that go to this school district, and you have no way of verifying that?
Correct.
Do you ever follow up, or your department follow up, whether or not the complainants are indeed making accurate statements in terms of who they are identification-wise?
We don't necessarily do that. I mean, I feel that, we have to take in the information regardless whether, even if we thought that it could be a made-up story, so to speak. The reality is we have to take in the facts that the complainant is providing for us, and that's just what we do. My concern is the pattern that's being shown with the complaints. That's why, to me, I feel that, there is truth behind it, due not only to the work that Vancouver Coastal Health does, but the pattern that the complaints are showing, that it is always sales to minor at an extremely young age.
And you stated that each time there's a visit that you conduct, or one of your officers conducts with a minor, that they'll visit 20 to 25 stores in a given day? Or?
Within that evening, correct.
And of the 20 to 25 stores that they do visit, are most of them passes, fails, or do you have a rough estimate?
Yeah, so like in pre-pandemic, we're at a 93% compliance rate, and we have approximately 750 tobacco and/or vape retailers in the Vancouver Coastal Health catchment area. So yes, in a 25 facility check, we might get two stores or so that sell.
And to confirm, based on your chronology that you provided, in 2017, there was only 1 compliance fail?
Correct.
And in 2018, there was also only 1 compliance fail?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sorry.
And in 2019, there was 2?
Correct.
And of the 4 compliance fails, only 2 violation tickets were issued directly to Mr. Kaki?
Yes. Just to add, our program uses progressive enforcement. So if an initial sale occurs, of course, discretion comes into play, but because we put an emphasis on education, we do like to give them that first opportunity to, we give them a warning, a verbal or a written warning, but then they do remain on an enforcement list, which would, result in the issuance of a ticket if another sale occurs. So that's why that only 2 of the 4 were tickets issued.
And you said earlier it was pre-pandemic, there was a 93 compliance rate.
Correct.
What about post-pandemic?
Post-pandemic, so we actually, our department was redeployed to help with, we were redeployed to help with case and contact tracing. So we just got back to the field 2 months ago, or not even 2 months ago. So our program basically was frozen. We did not conduct any minor test shops during the pandemic for obvious reasons.
And post-pandemic, I guess we're still in the pandemic sort of,
Yeah.
so, but since then, have there been more regular checks of stores?
So the only check that I'm aware of is the one that was at the end of the timeline, which is the, if I can just refer. So those were the inspections conducted by Officer James Rathbun on October 1st. So how that came about was because the agreement was made that Mr. Kaki would no longer be selling tobacco and vapor products due to the fact that technically, he legally is not allowed to sell these products in his store. And notice of intent was not submitted to the Ministry of Health. The officer was told that these products will no longer be sold. Officer Rathbun was out doing one of his rounds of compliance checks, so happened to be checking the Granville area. So just to confirm, Mr. Kaki was no longer selling these products, and James had sent his minor test shopper in, and the minor was successful in purchasing vapor products at that time.
And you provide more thorough logs of each of these chronology events in your chronology. Do you have the April 29th, 2021? I've gone through the materials. I don't think I see that specific note.
So it was April 29th.
2021, the compliant investigation.
I don't seem to have one in here. My apologies, I do not.
Because we have been discussing that in depth, but there seems to be no record of that visit, the April 29th, 2021. If counsel for the city has a copy, if we could receive a copy of it, or perhaps it's just not in the materials.
I don't see a copy in my materials, but perhaps we can try and locate that at the break.
Thank you. So I do have questions related to that April 29th, 2021 occurrence. So if we could locate a copy at some point, and then I could ask you questions regarding that afterwards, if that's agreeable with everyone.
Any objection if we stand down for 5 minutes to try and locate a copy of that report?
Okay, panel, we will take a 5-minute recess to allow council to secure that information. So we'll come back at 10, let's make it 10:24. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
2021, and April 29th, 2021.
Momentarily. Maybe what we can do, subject to any further questions from council, is stand down Mr. Kouris, give him an opportunity to collect those documents. In the meantime, we can continue on with the evidence of the Vancouver police officer, and then at the end of that, recall Mr. Kouris to deal with the inspection report.
I think if the parties are amenable to that, we can, in the interest of time, seeing nods. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that if you want to call the VBD member.
Thank you. We'll call you down then. Mr. Kouris, thank you. All right, the next witness for the city is Detective Constable Timothy Rich. Constable Rich, if you could take the witness stand, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, councillors.
Constable.
All right, if I take the mask off?
You're welcome to take the mask off if you're.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Constable Rich. I understand you are a member of the Vancouver Police Department.
That's correct, yes.
And how long have you been a member of the VPD for?
15 years last week.
Now, what's your current assignment with the VPD?
So I'm currently in charge of our negotiator team, but at the time of this project, I was a detective in our youth services unit. So in charge of managing more complex investigations involving youth.
Now, in and around the time you referred to, I think we're talking about 2020?
Correct, yeah.
And
starting then, yeah.
And it was in 2020 that you were part of that youth, called it Youth Services Unit?
That's right, yeah.
And what types of things were you responsible for as part of the Youth Services Unit in 2020?
That seemed to keep changing, but we, as a broad statement, we would deal with investigations involving youth. Sometimes that meant youth suspects, sometimes that meant youth victims. Just depended on our capacity at the moment and what needed to be tackled. So, yeah, and this, clearly in this moment, it was an investigation where youth were accessing narcotics, but that wasn't the only thing we did. It was just what we landed on here.
And I understand that in 2020, you assumed conduct of a project that investigated the business activities of the subject premises for Planet Rock at 1051 Granville Street.
Yeah, that's correct. It had been looked at a little bit starting in 2019, but just operational capacity, we weren't able to launch a meaningful investigation to it at that time. So in a little later in 2020, mid-2020, some new complaints came in, and my sergeant requested that I take over the investigation.
Before the panel at tab 6 of the evidence materials, we have a report from you dated March 10th, 2021. Do you have a copy of that report with you?
I do, yes.
It details some background in terms of your beginnings of the investigation, what you were concerned about. Can you just explain to the panel how it is you became involved and what information you learned that prompted you to undertake an undercover investigation into the premises?
Absolutely, yeah. It's certainly slightly unusual to undertake an undercover investigation into just a store selling marijuana. However, in looking at the history related to Planet Rock, starting back in 2017, we have a variety of files generated of varying credibility, varying, I shouldn't say credibility, but I should say of varying weight. Some are like the 2017 file, ones where we simply had 5 youth gathered at front of the store and someone made a complaint about that. So limited value there, certainly. In 2018, though, we see a lot of parents calling in to complain about their kids purchasing marijuana and vape products at Planet Rock. We have several files of that nature. We also have 4, I've listed them here as CAD calls, and that just means computer automated dispatch files of youth purchasing vape products at Planet Rock. And what these would basically be someone calling in saying, oh, hey, my so-and-so did this, but because my guess would be that because these are just vape complaints, we didn't have resources at the time to manage them. So they exist only as CAD calls, not as an instance where an officer actually went and investigated. However, there are, in total 12 complaints that were levied against Planet Rock.
Those 12 complaints are enumerated beginning at the first page of your report. Aside from number 1 on that list, which is a January 31st, 2021 complaint, it looks like the rest of them came through to your unit between April 2017 and later in 2019. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And the nature of those, just without getting into any of them, the specifics, related to youth activities, the sale of cannabis product, vaping products to youths out of Planet Rock during that time.
That's correct, yeah.
With complaints being made. I see father, a youth risk, youth worker, a 13-year-old boy's mother. Those are the nature of the complaints that you receive.
Yeah, and that's right. And the what really put us onto Planet Rock was a social worker at David Thompson Secondary complaining that basically all of her kids were going to Planet Rock to purchase these products, vape products, marijuana products. So it was her information that that it was well known amongst youth that this was the place to go.
Okay. So when you took over the project, was it in early 2020?
Mid-2020, approximately.
Mid-2020?
Yeah.
You would have reviewed all of these complaints, knowing the history at the premises, and you decided to propose taking further action in terms of investigation.
Yeah, absolutely. It struck me that this wasn't a simple fix. As Mr. Curris pointed out earlier, simply having youth attend and doing compliance checks didn't seem to have a meaningful impact. So it occurred to me that we needed to take a more serious approach to investigating Planet Rock and Mr. Kaki.
So you were aware of Vancouver Coastal Health's efforts in and around this time with respect to the compliance checks and ticketing activities and that sort of thing?
Yeah, and I won't pretend that I can recall exactly when I knew every single detail, but I do know that as we were drafting, or as I was drafting our operational plan for this project, we were in contact with Coastal Health. So that would have been late 2020 and early 2021.
And this operational plan was a proposal with respect to the investigation activities?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, this obviously, as we'll get into shortly here, this required a fair amount of resourcing and some risk management on our part. So I had to create an operational plan that had proposals detailing a budget, how many officers would be using, a timeline, all those sorts of details. But that included things like our prime and CAD background, the city's involvement with it thus far in compliance checks, and as we'll get into shortly, also doing some surveillance work of my own just to determine the volume of youths attending Planet Rock.
Okay. And now this project was approved by your superiors.
Correct.
And dubbed Project Mercury.
That's right, yes.
Okay. So when you talk about resourcing, what type of resourcing was necessary to undertake Project Mercury? This initial stage required minimal upfront. Just myself sitting in the back of a vehicle, watching for several hours at a time just to observe activity. But once I saw a pattern that emerging of youth attending Planet Rock that supported the prime and CAD history, what I decided was that we would need to use undercover operators and engage our BC Municipal Undercover Program to properly investigate Planet Rock. So that involved working with a team of 5 or 6 folks in the BC Undercover Program. That involved multiple levels of approval and involvement within the VPD as well. So. And those surveillance activities culminated in the execution of a search warrant at some point, is that right?
The surveillance activities and all of the undercover activities, that's correct.
Okay, so we'll get to that. Why don't you tell the panel then how you started off with Project Mercury? What were the initial stages of any investigation?
So as I'm sure we can all appreciate, rumors, innuendo, all the things that sort of exist in the ether, those are fine and good, but we actually need to see something with our own eyes sometimes to see that it's really there. So in this instance, I was looking at years of activity and history of Planet Rock, but there was a notable break in 2020, and I certainly couldn't attribute that to a pandemic or to anything else, so I needed to see if that activity that had been documented was still real, still happening. And actually, I'll just make a quick date correction here. I wrote January 8th and 9th, 2020. That should list as 2021. I observed, so myself, over a period of just shy of 3 hours, I observed what I would approximate to be, 11 youths attending Planet Rock. So they, again, this is my own observations made from across the street. I didn't stop any of these youths. I didn't confirm their identification. I didn't confirm their age. However, I work in the youth unit. I had been there for several years. I'd been inside high schools over and over and over again, working in and around youth. I'd say my ability to differentiate, a 15-year-old from a 20-year-old was fairly dialed in, but I will acknowledge fallibility on my part in that realm. However, I still will assert that I believe there were 11 youths attending in that on January 8th and January 9th in that cumulative 3-hour period, in and amongst other customers as well. I also had another officer on December 5th and 12th, 2020, conduct, I believe he conducted just over 2 hours of observations as well, and he observed what he accounted to be 5 youth entering Planet Rock.
The purpose of these this initial surveillance on your part essentially was to establish that the business was being frequented by youths who you believe to be under the age of.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so satisfying yourself after conducting some surveillance in December 2020 and January 2021, you escalated the project to undercover investigation.
Yeah, that's right. There are complexities around using youths as sources and using them as agents, anything like that. So we were very limited in our some of our operational abilities. We don't have access to youth ourselves. We can't go out and ask a youth, as a police officer, I can't go out and ask a youth to go and purchase marijuana, anything else. So the closest we could get, I went out and I obtained three school uniforms from a local private school. I requested the 3 youngest looking UCs that we could get from our undercover program. And we also obtained, with the assistance of the private school, we obtained student ID for those 3 students, parent students. So we had 3 young-looking UCs, and I will just point out an anecdote here. At one point, we had to walk one of them within our police facility and walk past several police officers who I suspect knew that officer, did not recognize her, and just kind of gave a very kind of confused look as to why there was such a young person, again, to my account, such a young person wandering through our facility. I would say that the costumes, for lack of a better effect, were effective, or a better term, were effective. So we had 3 young-looking undercover operators with uniforms, ID, and also with sort of an array of youthful apparel. And we decided, so I was the lead in the project at the time and also the undercover liaison officer. So sort of set out a course of action with the undercover operators that we would conduct. I mean, truthfully, it wasn't a set number of buys, or operations, I should say. We had roughly 10 as a maximum outline for what we would engage in. Purpose of that being, we didn't know if we would just get marijuana, we didn't know if we would just get vape products, we didn't know if it would take multiple attempts to go in and create some familiarity, if they would just sell to us right away, or what we would find when we started engaging in undercover operations at Planet Rock. We also had heard rumors, and these were unsubstantiated, which I'm happy to say, that there might be selling other weapons or other things at Planet Rock beyond, just the knives and bear spray that we found. So thankfully, some of those rumors that we heard, we investigated and they were unsubstantiated. So that's great. I'm happy to see that Mr. Kaki wasn't engaging in any of that activity. However, we did discover a lot of other concerning activity at the store.
You've noted 11 such incidents of undercover inspection or investigation at the premises starting in December 2020. This is just under the heading undercover operations at the third page or fourth page of your report. First, just with respect to the undercover operators, it sounds like the objective here is, although you didn't have anybody who was underage, was to costume them in a way that would at least twig a store clerk or an owner of a business to identify them, to ensure that they were of age when purchasing age-restricted products.
Very well put. Yeah, that's exactly it. Because we didn't have access to actual youths, we had to create the appearance of youths. And it was exactly that, to trigger the action of checking ID, to seeing if they would actually acknowledge that we were bringing in very young-looking people in school uniforms who, by all accounts, should have been considered youths. Yeah.
And this is a high school uniform for a private school.
Thank you. That's right. High school uniforms, yes.
So why don't you tell us what happened in the course of the undercover operation, starting with the 2 December incidents? What was the
Absolutely.
purpose of those?
So in December 18th, 2020, we had 3 undercover operators enter Planet Rock in school uniforms. I won't go into names here, but I'll just state that we didn't encounter Mr. Kaki. We encountered another employee who we did encounter a number of times at the store. At this point, the operational goal was simply to go in, assess the store, see who was working, potentially create some familiarity with store staff, and use it as a way to set up future visits and purchases from the store. So in this instance, the UCs looked around, had the shop, the store worker show some products around, again, kind of creates some familiarity, and at this point, all they purchased was a marijuana grinder. And then they purchased that and exited the store, and then turned that over to me, which is what they did with basically all of these undercover operations. So based on that, we decided we'd send the youth back in this time, or the undercover operators back in. We alternated between the school uniforms and youth apparel, just to partly to see if they would continue to recognize the undercover operators, to see if they were only seeing the clothing, or if they were actually, becoming familiar with the people that we were sending in time and time again. So on December 29th, we sent in the 3 operators again in youth attire, and they spoke to the same employee as on December 18th. And that employee did appear, again, this is subjective, I recognize, but they did appear to recognize the undercover operators, and at that point sold a bong, rolling papers, and tobacco. So that...
And no ID was requested by
No ID was requested, that's correct, and that's consistent throughout every single interaction. No ID was ever requested, no age was ever discussed. Aside from the UCs actually at a couple of points dropping little hints like, oh, the test was so hard, or things like that, just to see if we could, again, trigger an action on the part of the store. So on January 4th, 2021, 3 UCOs, the same UCOs, they entered Planet Rock in school uniforms this time and spoke to the same employee as the previous 2 dates. This time, the employee sold a vape pen and 2 packages of, the employee acknowledged, illegal 50 milligram cartridges for the vape pens. And again, did not ask for ID. And at this point, the UCOs advised me that they had actually observed signage for Crop King Seeds marijuana posted inside the store. So several posters kind of dotted throughout. And I can just keep rattling through if you'd like, if that's...
Yeah, if you could. It looks like in the next attendance by the UCOs that they they were successful in the purchase of marijuana or cannabis products.
Correct, yeah. So we sent them back on January 9th, same three UCOs, in, again, regular youth attire, so not school uniforms. And they spoke to the same employee as the previous 3 dates. And that employee sold 7 grams of bud marijuana, 3 edible gummies, a pot brownie, and more of the illegal 50 milligrams vape cartridge packs, as well as 2 glass pipes. No ID asked for, and the employee again did appear to recognize the undercover operators. Of note, at this point, the undercover operators advised me that there were numerous knives on display. As mentioned, we had some concern that they might be illegal. Just to jump ahead briefly, when we did our search warrant, we actually brought in a weapons expert who advised that, as far as they could tell, none of the knives displayed were illegal. But it was at this point where they noticed that, and I just wanted to cap that off, because I don't want to levy any.
With respect to the sale of the cannabis products, as of January 9th, 2021, and at all material times, there are no provincial authorizations or city authorizations in place that would allow for the sale of cannabis products out of the business. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah. Part of the operations plan was to confirm that they were not licensed through the city, the government, anyone, to sell cannabis products.
And no such authorizations exist?
No such authorizations exist, that's correct.
So not only were they selling to persons being held out as minors without requesting identification, they simply weren't authorized to sell those products in the first place?
That's correct.
Okay. Moving on to the next point then, January 13th. Pick it up from there, please.
On January 13th, the 3 UCOs, again, same UCOs, entered Planet Rock, this time in school uniforms, and encountered a new worker, someone that they hadn't seen before. That worker advised that Morgan was bringing in his own product to sell inside the store. So that employee, who we never identified, did not sell anything to youths and said that, that there was no product to be sold. It was around this time that we, this isn't to do with UC specifically, but just this is in following with the timeline, we were looking at a Google review, and we observed that there was a poster or just a little made-up 8x11 sign just saying salvia for sale, essentially. And salvia being a Schedule 4 CDSA drug, so Controlled Drug and Substances Act, narcotic, essentially.
Do you know what the origins of salvia is? Is it a cannabis product? Is it a? Do you know any of that?
I wouldn't, I can't pretend to know the exact origins, but I know it's sort of in line with mushrooms and some other kind of certainly less potent drugs, which is Scheduled 4. So it's it's much lower tier stuff.
It is a federally regulated substance.
That's correct. Yeah.
And no authorizations in place that would allow for the sale of that.
No. Sorry, and the reason I brought that up is because when the UCs entered the store, they did look for that signage as well, and they did not observe it at that time. Just to know.
I'm foreshadowing a bit, but they were able to secure the purchase of some salvia at a later point.
They were later, yes. Yeah.
So let's just carry on until we get to that. So I see on January 14th, the UCOs entered for the purpose of determining Mr. Kaki's schedule. Told he normally works Tuesdays.
Yeah, and this was just one UCO entered in for a quick, no intention to buy. At this point, we'd only seen a separate employee and one unknown employee, and we were interested to see if we could actually find Mr. Kaki working at the store. So the UC entered simply to ask about his schedule and made up some ruse to do so.
And January 18th, there was again a sale of cannabis product to the UCOs posing as youth.
That's correct. Yeah. So on January 18th, the 3 UCOs who'd been undercover operators who'd been attending for every other operation, they entered in youth attire, so not school uniform. And at this point, they encountered Mr. Kaki, who sold 2 packages of marijuana cookies labeled at 40 milligrams each, and a 7-gram prepackaged baggie of marijuana, a stealth vape pen, and 2 illegal packages of 50 milligram cartridges for the vape pen.
Okay. On this occasion, they established the fact that it was Mr. Kaki who was the person selling the items from the store?
That's right, yeah. I had previously shown UCs a picture of Mr. Kaki and subsequently followed up with them to make sure that they had, could confirm his identification from the picture and from observing him in the store.
And again, Mr. Kaki didn't ask for identification for the sale?
That's correct, no ID.
Okay.
Asked for.
Moving forward, January 19th, 2021, tell us what happened that day?
Yeah, so on January 19th, we had one of the youngest looking, they were all young looking, but by far the youngest looking UCO enter Planet Rock in a school uniform. She encountered Kaki, who sold that undercover operator 2 edible marijuana gummies and $80 worth of salvia. So as noted, the sign had been taken down, but we noted that the sign was there until fairly recently. So we said, well, let's see what else they have. Let's ask about other products. When Mr. Kaki retrieved the salvia for the undercover operator, not only did he not ask for ID, he provided instructions as to how she should use it safely. Said words to the effect of, make sure you're with a friend, make sure you're sitting down, because when you take it, you're going to go, whoa. So that was concerning. And again, that this was Mr. Kaki selling a very young appearing undercover operator in a school uniform scheduled for CDSA controlled substance.
February 11th,
We had one UCO, and this was an adult appearing UCO, separate from the other 3. We were just curious at this point, who are they selling to? You know, who else? Will we encounter anything else if we just send in an adult and just try and buy some marijuana? What else are we going to encounter here? They sold, the undercover operator encountered the other employee, who is charged, I should mention, but I just won't name for the purposes of this hearing. But the other employee that we encountered multiple times, that employee sold the undercover operator bong and 5.28 grams of bud marijuana.
and it looks like on the next point, February 20th, 2021, you had some undercover shoppers observing the sales activities within the store.
Yeah, that's correct. We had, at this point, to our minds, shown that the sale of marijuana, vape products, tobacco products was readily available to anyone who wanted it. But at this point, we hadn't actually confirmed that the products were being sold to actual youths. In our minds, important for this hearing, but also very important for our criminal case against Mr. Kaki and the unnamed employee. So the undercover operator observed a 17-year-old purchase a pre-rolled marijuana joint from the previously unnamed employee. We did follow the customer outside of the store, where we stopped him, arrested him temporarily, seized the marijuana, and then released him without charges. But it did confirm his age, did confirm that he had purchased the marijuana from inside the store.
And then finally, February 22nd, there was again a sale to the youth presenting undercover officers of 5 pre-rolled joints, vape packages, and a vape battery without the request for identification.
Correct. And just to add, on February 20th, before part of the way that operation worked was I was again set up in the block observing Planet Rock, waiting for young appearing customers to go in to see if they would sell to them. And during that approximate hour of observations, I observed 13 customers who appeared to be youths, other than the one 17-year-old whose age we did confirm. And then on February 22nd, 2 undercover operators entered Planet Rock back in regular youth attire and encountered the previously unnamed employee, who sold them 5 pre-rolled joints, 2 illegal 50-milligram vape packages, and a vape battery. Again, none of these interactions was ID ever asked for, and that includes with the 17-year-old who we observed purchase marijuana from the store.
You then conducted an analysis of the product or I think most of the product that you were able to purchase from the store and confirm that they were all illicit substances that they were being held out as?
Exactly. Everything was confirmed to be what it was held out as. That's right.
Okay, and based on that, you were able to secure a search warrant with the belief that it would afford you with further evidence in the investigation of Cannabis Act infractions?
Absolutely. Cannabis Act and Controlled Drug and Substances Act, given the sale of salvia. And, part of the evidence we were looking to obtain was, we had information from that one unknown employee who was stating that, people just bring their own stuff in. And we wanted to, part of what was so necessary about the search warrant was to determine, okay, well, are these goods actually being stored inside the store, or are they being brought in and out as has been suggested? So we set up our search warrant on February 24th, 2021. Just to, I know it's a question you asked Mr. Corris previously, but just to address it here, in terms of resourcing, this was a heavy operational day. Probably this involved the full surveillance team. This involved ident, probably 10 to 15 detectives. Multiple man hours, so easily 30 officers involved over the course of this day and subsequently dealing with the property. So a very involved process on our part for sure. Part of that is that we needed or determined that we'd be arresting Mr. Kaki and the other unnamed charged employee on this day.
The search warrant yielded a number of items that turned out to be cannabis products and other controlled substances.
Correct, yeah. So we observed numerous vape products inside the store, not within our power to seize, but they were observed there. We observed numerous items of drug paraphernalia marketed toward young persons, at least in our opinion. Several posters advertising cannabis and cannabis seeds, which is a contravention under the new Cannabis Act. 52 packages of cannabis seeds, vials of suspected cannabis seeds, 5 of those. 10 canisters of bear spray, not themselves illegal, but there had been a previous, there was a file where youths were buying bear spray from Planet Rock and using it shortly after purchasing it from the store. So that was largely a safety seizure on our part. Some bud marijuana under 10 grams, several joints, 6 more of the marijuana cookies, and 6 marijuana brownies and 10 marijuana cookies. Notable with those is that the packaging with those brownies and cookies was identical to the packaging that we had purchased on previous dates. It was all the same, I believe, little tiny red heart sort of parchment paper packaging that we'd seen on every other encounter. So didn't matter who was selling it or what day we were there. The product we found on the search warrant day was the same product that we'd found on those other days or had been sold on those other days. 11 edible gummies, 47 red and blue pills containing suspected THC oil, 1 magic mushroom, 5 packages of shatter, just a concentrated cannabis product, 30 pills of containing suspected marijuana, and thousands and thousands, rackfuls of dime bags for packaging various drugs.
Can you just explain to the panel what dime bags are?
Again, I won't. I think the origin comes from it being a $10 bag of drugs or something like that. Often used for some harder drugs, but also can be used for cannabis in smaller quantities and things like that. So just a way of packaging and selling smaller quantities of drugs.
Like a small 1-inch by 1-inch Ziploc bag or something?
Yeah, even smaller sometimes. Yeah, in that realm. That's right.
In the course of the execution of the search warrant, I understand Mr. Kaki was at the premises.
Initially at his home, as mentioned, we had surveillance that day, and we observed him attend the premises, open up the store, and he was subsequently arrested inside the store.
And as part of the investigation, matter's been referred to federal Crown.
That's correct.
A request to lay charges under the Cannabis Act.
Correct. Yeah. Notably, the Cannabis Act, as we know it now, is very, very new and very untested. So, I will acknowledge here that we laid something like 90 charges between the two suspects. I'll acknowledge right now that that's a very large number, and that's being whittled down actively as we speak. We just simply didn't know what would stick and what was relevant to our case because it's such new untested law. So the number, I will have to acknowledge the number is much lower than is presented in this report. But I think notably what we'll be moving forward with would be, selling under the Cannabis Act and probably trafficking under the Controlled Drug and Substances Act for the salvia.
And have you had any further dealings with the business since that time?
Myself, no. And I believe all further dealings have been with through Mr. Curris and his folks.
I understand you attended to an interview collectively with Mr. Curris and Chief License Inspector at some point. Is that right?
I did, yeah. I suppose that would be the one other dealing I've had, though I didn't deal with Mr. Kaki directly. It was a preliminary hearing, I guess, preceding this. Yeah.
Okay. And that was on July 15th, 2021, and that
Correct.
was your only other involvement with the matter?
No other involvement, no.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions for the constable.
So just a few questions, Officer. Just to reiterate, the initial investigation, you stated that there were 12 complaints and the VPD didn't have resources to follow up with those complaints.
Not all of them. And I don't have notes of which ones exactly, but I know we did, at the time, the investigations, as you can see, were quite limited. As a function of this operation, we did follow up with, I believe, 2 or 3 of the parents. I don't have a note of which ones exactly, but we did follow up with 2 or 3 of the families to get more information about what had happened.
And when you say follow up, do you mean you attended the residence and spoke with them in person?
That's right, yeah.
It was you specifically? Or?
No, I believe it was Detective Stables who had went and followed up with them, or maybe another detective in the unit.
But there are no notes from those visits in the
No, nothing here.
bureaus? Okay. And then the remaining complaints that they weren't followed up on?
Which ones are you referring to?
Of the 12, you said of you.
Oh, I see,
2
yeah.
or 3 were followed up with.
That's right, yeah. That's correct.
And the 2019, you said the social worker at a Vancouver high school. Was that with you directly that she had contacted?
No, initially this operation was looked at by some other detectives in the unit. As I mentioned, operational necessity, they weren't able to pursue it fully, unfortunately. But that's who the complaint initially went to.
So they didn't follow up with that youth, the social worker?
They did, yes. They did follow up with her. Yeah.
And they visited her in person? And
To the best of my knowledge, yeah.
But you weren't involved with any of these complaints? You hadn't visited anyone in the 12 complaints that you listed here?
No, that wasn't my task with the investigation. My task was other things. So as part of being the lead, I had to delegate work to other folks, which is what I did with those tasks.
And the undercover officers, you stated that there were, in your summary here, that there were just 3 undercover officers?
3 youth presenting undercover operators.
And how old were those undercover officers?
I don't know their exact ages. I just know their appearance. Yeah.
Okay, so
I would say mid-20s probably, but I can't tell you exactly.
And you weren't made aware of their actual age? You just looked at them?
Yeah,
and said,
that's right.
Okay. And you stated that they appeared to be youths, but that was just from your opinion?
Entirely subjective, absolutely, yeah.
So there were no surveys conducted, no independent parties consulted to see whether or not they appeared as youths?
Nothing formal, no. There were lots of conversations around the undercover operators that were being suggested. And people generally agreed that they could pass as youths in the right context. But no formal process was undertaken for that.
And when you say generally people agreed, who were these people?
Other detectives, other undercover operators.
So just other officers had the same, similar opinion, okay. And you stated that you had surveyed the premises on January 8th, 2021, January 9th, 2021. I believe you said it was a typo. Is that correct? It should be
Correct, yeah, my mistake there.
December 5th and December 12th. And you noticed that there were youths, they appeared to be youths that entered the premises. But were you aware if they made any purchases?
No,
Oh, okay. So they just entered the premises?
that's how they did, yeah.
Okay. So they could have walked out with a T-shirt, and you wouldn't have known whether it was a T-shirt or vape product.
They might not have purchased anything at all. It's all entirely possible. I will note that I don't recall anyone walking out with any packaging, and they all were there for generally under 5 minutes. So to me, that reads as they were in there purchasing small items, but such as things that my undercover operators purchased. But yeah, certainly, I don't know what they bought.
Okay.
Yeah.
And whether or not they bought anything.
True. Yeah, very true.
And of the 11 different undercover operations, I do note that there's a couple, I believe that was just a different undercover officer that came in for information, but
That's right.
generally speaking, it was just the same 3 undercover officers throughout.
That's right.
And each visit was probably about a week apart. Is that correct?
Yeah, roughly, sure.
And generally, the individual that sold the cannabis products, it was the same employee for the mass majority.
For the bulk of these visits, aside from 2, it was the same employee.
Employee.
The 18th and 19th, where it was Mr. Kaki. The rest were the other employee.
Okay. And the other employee, you stated, appeared that he had recognized those 3 undercover officers previously.
That was their perception, yes.
And generally speaking, if someone was not to ID an individual the first visit and they subsequently came to visit again and they recognized them, it's probably unlikely that they would ask for ID the second time if they've recognized them the first time.
It's possible. I mean, I would hope that someone in a school uniform would be identified with proper ID, but that's my perspective.
And those officers, again, were in their mid-20s.
To my estimation, in their mid-20s. I don't know their actual ages.
So they could be late 20s, early 30s even.
Could be. They looked like youths to me, especially in school uniforms.
Again, your opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you spoke of thousands of small dime bags for packaging drugs, they weren't labeled for packaging drugs.
No, absolutely not. No, there was no, I wouldn't want to imply that they were being used to sold anything harder or anything at all. They were simply dime bags available on shelves. That's
Okay,
it.
so just small Ziploc bags.
With labeling, I guess what sets them apart is there's always little designs and things on them, so that's what these had. So, but again, no labels, not designated for any specific purpose for sure.
Okay. And since that visit on February 24th, 2021, where you conducted the search warrant, has any other police officers attended the premises since then?
To my knowledge, the only subsequent visits were just administrative, dealing with Mr. Kaki, but I wasn't involved in any of those. I was basically I completed this project, this phase of the project, and then I was off dealing with other things.
And then during those administrative visits, are you aware whether or not they would notice if there were cannabis products about, or if they would make a note of that?
I don't know of any notes of it. The only cannabis products on display were bongs and things like that, but we didn't seize all of them, so I suspect they were still there, but I don't know either way.
Just bongs, though.
Well, all the other cannabis products were stored in a back room, typically in a fridge or somewhere out of view. So the only things that were on display up front were, bongs, pipes, knives, things like that.
Were any edible products on display?
No.
No. Okay. That concludes my questions.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See, Mr. Kouros has returned with some papers in hand. Mr. Kouros, were you able to locate the inspection report from the April 2021? Maybe what we can do is stand down again, get copies made for members of the panels, and then allow him to be subject to questioning.
I have 3 copies.
3 copies? Are we okay to just proceed then, pass those up?
I think if we have copies in the interest of time, I think it'd be great if we could proceed.
Yes, thank you.
For yourself, and then I have one for myself.
Perhaps I can also ask if the clerks can make a copy and that could be emailed to Councillor Hardwick because she's participating virtually. Is that possible? Sorry.
he's being subject to questioning by counsel for the licensing. He's presented the inspection reports from the April 2021 inspections. Those are now before the panel. I'm just going to allow Ms. Fung to continue her question.
Thank you. Mr. Couric, looking at the closing comments, there's no mention of a specific date in which Mr. Kaki had informed you that he would stop selling.
No, he did not indicate a specific date, but as I mentioned before, with the laws changing for one to sell these products in British Columbia, that deadline had already passed. So this was an extra opportunity for Mr. Kaki to remove these products from his shelf before taking the next steps, which would be issuing basically a public health order under the Public Health Act to remove these hazardous products.
Mm-hmm. So in your chronology, you stated the store owner, Al, said he would stop selling vapor products by the end of March. That's not corroborated by this report.
Correct, but again, as I mentioned, the deadline for tobacco and vapor retailers to submit their notice of intent to the Ministry of Health was far past that date.
And, okay, so just to be clear, even if he did state by the end of March, this compliant investigation occurred April 29th, 2021, so March had already passed, so he wouldn't be able to go back in time essentially and stop selling by March.
Correct.
2021.
Our powers are limited in terms of seizures, so we wouldn't have the ability to seize these products, to take them off the shelf for him. So that's why we were hoping through our discussion with Mr. Kaki that he would voluntarily take these products down.
Mm-hmm. But he didn't specify a
did not.
timeline. Okay. And just the last point is, just to confirm, those 4 failed checks, the ones that one had occurred each corresponding year, so one in 2017, one in 2018, 2 in 2019, none of those incidents were with Mr. Kaki. Is that correct?
The person who sold to the minor?
Yes.
No, they were not. But being the sole proprietor, that's where we have to issue that ticket to that sole proprietor of the business.
And you stated that one of the issues you had with enforcement or compliance was the fact that there were high employee turnover rates, and there seemed to be.
I would say if my memory serves me correct, he did have one individual. I don't know if I'm allowed to name by names, but there was one individual that seemed to be there more often than not, or we would see more often than not. But yes, we would rarely, I shouldn't say rarely, but aside from this one individual, it seemed to be someone new at all times.
And you stated that compliance is more difficult when there isn't the same manager or you're not able to connect with the manager directly.
From our point of view, the responsibility comes from ownership. Appointing the right people, such as a manager and assistant manager, to run your shop if you cannot be there, yes, would be that point person for communication, any potential progressive enforcement to be worked with. So with Al being a sole proprietor and it being very difficult to get in contact with Al, this would obviously complicate things to make sure that the right people are receiving the right information. But again, when selling these products in British Columbia that are age restricted, the responsibility does fall on the ownership of the business.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Corus. We can move along to the city's final witness, Chief License Inspector. Thank you.
Good morning, Sarah Hicks, Chief License Inspector.
Thank you, Ms. Hicks. Ms. Hicks, you've been acting Chief License Inspector for the City of Vancouver since when?
I've been the acting Chief License Inspector since April of this year. Prior to that, I was the Deputy Chief License Inspector since 2014, and I've been the Chief License Inspector since October.
Thank you. Now, your duties as Chief License Inspector include the periodic review of business activities of the license holders throughout the city to ensure compliance with not only city bylaws, but also Vancouver Charter and other regulations. Is that right?
They do.
And on occasion, such matters are brought to your attention from outside enforcement agencies.
Correct.
That would include agencies like the Vancouver Police Department and Vancouver Coastal Health.
Correct.
And of course, today, one such matter involves the business activities of Planet Rock at 1051 Granville Street.
They do.
Now, I understand that it was VPD and Vancouver Coastal Health that alerted you to the sale of tobacco, vaping, cannabis products to minors, but also that cannabis products were being sold out of the premises without the required provincial or city licensing.
Correct.
So, when were you first approached by VPD and Vancouver Coastal Health about this?
I received a report from Vancouver Police Department in March of 2021. And subsequent to that, I received information from Vancouver Coastal Health in April for the summary that is part of the hearing package and the more detailed inspection results in July of 2021.
So specifically, Vancouver Coastal Health had provided you with the synopsis by Mr. Kouris, along with the inspection reports that are part of the evidence package today.
Correct.
And with respect to VPD, what information was shared with you by VPD?
VPD provided me with a summary of their investigation into 1051 Granville.
That includes the undercover operation
It does.
and the execution of the search warrant and the seizure of cannabis product?
It does.
I understand receiving that information, you did some of your own research into city records with respect to the licensee.
I did, and during that research, I found that in 2011, the location had been suspended for a separate police incident involving the purchase of stolen goods.
Okay. That city records relating to that 2011 license suspension are located in the evidence materials at tab 2. I see that at the time, Deputy Chief License Inspector was Mr. Tom Hamill.
Correct.
He's since retired, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And as you indicated, it related to stolen goods being purchased through the store.
Correct.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that the term for that is a fencing operation. Is that correct?
To my understanding, yes.
So, to your understanding, with respect to the earlier incident, there was another VPD undercover operation that held out the sale of stolen goods to Mr. Kaki at the premises.
That is my understanding.
And Mr. Kaki sold or purchased those goods and requested others to be provided to him for possible resale.
Based on the letter provided by the Deputy Chief License Inspector at the time, yes.
That's your understanding of what
That is my
happened?
understanding.
Now, that suspension was given and ultimately upheld through an appeal hearing before a similar panel in City Council. Is that right?
It was. The original suspension had been for a 21-day period. Upon appeal, the suspension was upheld, but changed to 14 days.
So your understanding at some point came from your own file research into an earlier license suspension for the licensee. You came to understand that Vancouver Coastal Health had conducted a number of failed compliance checks and issued tickets through their enforcement efforts.
Correct.
As well as the results of the undercover operation from Vancouver Police.
Correct.
Now, we don't need to go into all of that. You knew all of the information that was provided in oral testimony today, as well as the evidence package. What concern did you have as Chief License Inspector knowing this background with respect to the operation of this particular licensee?
I had concern that Based on the prior history of the location from 2011, along with the history of complaints shown through VPD and the failed inspections, that there was a pattern that this business was not complying with regulations, and that, based off the probability, with the failed inspections through Vancouver Coastal Health, that they were selling vaping products at a minimum, if not cannabis, from the VPD file to youth in the neighborhood.
So having that information before you, what steps did you decide to take? What were your next steps?
I looked to schedule a meeting with the licensee so that I could understand, from their perspective, what occurred, to understand whether there were any mitigating circumstances that they could bring to light, and what they had done as a result of the issues that were at hand.
And that interview took place in July, is that right?
Correct.
July of this year, July 15th?
That is correct.
And a copy of your notes of that interview are also contained in the evidence material. Those notes are at tab 7, and you may wish to refer to specific passages. You may not, but maybe what I'll ask generally is just what did you learn in the course of that meeting?
Through the questions that were asked of Mr. Kaki, I learned that it didn't appear as though Mr. Kaki had put much in place in terms of mitigating the risks that had been brought forward. He advised that, the issues at hand were as a result of his staff, and that he had fired those staff members throughout history, as a result of the failed compliance inspections from Vancouver Coastal Health, as well as the operation that VPD had conducted. But aside from that, he was unable to articulate anything that he had done or taken responsibility over the years for.
So we have a situation where you're interviewing him. There's a backdrop to the story in that he's been ticketed, he's been warned, he's been subject to a search warrant. And there's nothing positive that he can show you in terms of steps that he's taken to ensure that there wasn't going to be continued sale of this product, either cannabis product or vaping cannabis product to minors.
No, not during our meeting. His counsel did discuss that they would be looking to create a procedure manual, which would clearly outline the requirements of the employees in the store, including that of identifying shoppers who were under the age of 25 in terms of their processes and steps moving forward.
Okay, so there was an indication in the meeting that they were compiling a manual, I guess a policy manual, to help with the employees?
Correct.
And to train the employees? What's your understanding?
To provide training and clear expectations.
Now, following that meeting, July 15th, 2021, were you ever provided with a copy of that manual, that material?
I was. Counsel for Mr. Kaki did provide me with a copy of the manual.
Okay, approximately when was that?
I believe that was in late July.
Now, you don't need to go into specifics of that manual, but it was being held out as a solution for an ongoing problem, namely the sale of these items to minors, correct?
That manual, along with the hiring of a new manager, yes.
Okay. And the impression that you were left with was that the licensee believed that with the hiring of the new manager and the new policies in place, that this would alleviate the problem.
That is what they withheld, yes.
Okay. The subsequent to receiving that manual, however, you became aware of another failed compliance check by Vancouver Coastal Health. Is that right?
I was. After I sent my decision letter to recommend the license be revoked, I was subsequently made aware from Vancouver Coastal Health that on the same day as my letter, on October 1st, there was another failed compliance check where vaping product was sold to a youth.
So even before that October 1st date, in consideration of the manual, the information you learned in the interview, you at some point weren't satisfied that this should be an ongoing business activity in the city.
I was not.
And you set out the reasons for that in your letter, which is also included in the materials at tab 8. And I've read from 2 paragraphs at the end of the letter, beginning at the second page. And what you've said in your letter was that based on the information from Vancouver Coastal Health and the Vancouver Police Department, as well as the previous business license suspension, I have concluded that you are operating your business with a total disregard for the laws and acts in which you require to operate, and has created a drain on city and police resources. In addition to this, I am of the opinion that your best practices are harmful and dangerous to the health of safety of youths. And you stand by that belief?
I do.
And I take it that the fact that there was another failed compliance on the date that you wrote this letter, in your mind, validates that conclusion that you came to.
It does.
Let me ask you this. I gave an overview of the authorities to both this panel and to yourself with respect to revocations and suspensions. Did you turn to your mind as to whether or not a suspension in this case may be an appropriate enforcement action?
During a review, that is always something that I consider, whether or not a suspension would have the effect of changing business behavior. Based on the history that was in front of me and the owner's lack of ability or willingness to take responsibility and place blame solely on his employees, I did not believe that a suspension would have that effect and that this business would continue to have infractions, of which we've seen occur on October 1st.
You had no faith that the sale of minors was going to stop with anything short of the revocation of the business license?
I did not, and I do not.
And at this point, you are making the recommendation to this panel to have that business license revoked.
I am.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Ms. Hicks, so since October 2011, have there been any incidents of reported or complaints of sales of stolen goods or purchases of stolen goods from Planet Rock?
Not to my understanding. That would be information that would be provided to VPD.
So since 2011, since his 2-week suspension, you weren't aware of any other incidents of sales of stolen goods or products?
No.
So there's potential there that Mr. Kaki had learned from that incident in October of 2011 and no longer sold stolen goods.
There's the potential for that, yes.
And the letter that you had sent to Mr. Kaki in my office on October 1st, 2021, did you receive the report from, or were you aware of the site visit on October 1st prior to sending this letter?
No, I was not.
And when were you made aware of that October 1st site visit?
I believe it was October 5th.
And your primary concern with Mr. Kaki retaining his business license is that sales of vape and vape products are going to be sold to minors. Is that correct?
My concern is that he has shown his business is unable to follow the regulations and will continue to do so, putting the health and safety of youths at risk.
And not following through with the regulations, you mean selling vape products to minors?
That is certainly at hand, yes.
Those are my questions.
Great, thank you. At this point, the panel members do have an opportunity to ask any questions of the three witnesses that we have heard from Vancouver Coastal Health, Vancouver Police Department, and the City of Vancouver's license inspector. Do panel members have any questions at this stage? Nope, okay, seeing none. At this point, we will move on to the opening remarks from the licensee and the licensee's counsel. Please go ahead.
Sorry, is it fine if we proceed with questions for Mr. Kaki? So I'll do the direct of Mr. Kaki, and then we'll have a summary on our position.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm not seeing any members for the witnesses, so I think we should follow the procedure here because we do have a sort of quasi-judicial procedure, so it would be best if we could follow the order today. This is your opportunity to provide some context and present your case.
Planet Rock has been in business for 10 years. It's a staple within the community, which is strictly a commercial retail area of downtown Vancouver. Planet Rock sells novelty products and goods and electronic accessories such as t-shirts, bongs, pipes, drones, cell phone chargers, drawing books, and coloring books, and until about a month ago, vapes and vape products. Over the years, Planet Rock has continued to diversify the products sold in the store and has continued to move towards more novelty items that appeal to the demographic of patrons in the area, along with products for the once thriving tourist community. The owner, Al Kareem Kaki, has been the sole proprietor of Planet Rock for the entirety of its inception and has over the years provided employment opportunities for numerous individuals on an ongoing basis. Mr. Kaki has had 2 to 3 employees working either part-time or full-time. Over the years, the various employees have left the business for other ventures, with the exception of a couple of employees who have worked for Mr. Kaki for a few years. The employees that have worked with Mr. Kaki have garnered his trust, and as such, when Mr. Kaki's health conditions started to be affected and required medical attention, and he was not able to frequent the store as often, he entrusted the day-to-day operations of his business to his employees. During the peak of his health issues, Mr. Kaki would attend the store every 2 to 3 weeks, and when he did visit, it was merely to collect proceeds from sales for the weeks leading up to his visit and to deposit it at a bank. During these periods of absences are when the incidents with Vancouver Coastal Health had occurred, and with the VPD as well. So to summarize, the Vancouver Health has provided a chronology, and from that chronology, again, it should be noted that in 2017, there was only one instance in which the compliance check failed. The same applies in 2012, while 2 occurred in 2019. Of the only 4 incidents that had occurred over a 3-year period, Mr. Kaki was not the individual who had sold to minors. Mr. Kaki was and is well aware that it is not legal to sell vape and vape products to minors, nor would he do so as he has a daughter himself and would never want a tobacco retailer to sell vape and vape products to his daughter when she was a minor. Mr. Kaki was highly concerned and regretful that those instances even occurred and has since dismissed the employees that were involved in those cases. To reiterate from the VPD's report, the 12 incidents reported to the VPD should not be considered infractions or examples of sales to minors taking place by Mr. Kaki or his staff because they have not been proven and for the most part are hearsay. They could very well be false reports made by competitors, disgruntled youth who have been denied the sale of vape or vape products, as Mr. Kaki and his employees have in the past been threatened by youth that they would file a report against him if he or his staff would not sell them vape products. Or even youth who have obtained these items elsewhere, such as from their friends or older friends, but they did not want to disclose this to their parents. In response to the undercover operations, they conducted 11 different visits, but to be clear, in reading the results of the operation, there were only 3 undercover officers that conducted these visits. The same 3 officers would attend multiple times on different dates, and again, these undercover officers were all over the age of 19 and were adults. They potentially were in their mid-20s, late 20s, or even early 30s. The VPD stated that they appeared as youth to the officers that conducted the operation, but that is a highly subjective opinion. Therefore, the undercover visit should not be considered instances of sales to minors or youths because it was not a sale to minors or youths. Accordingly, although there have only been 4 incidents from 2017 to September of 2021 in which actual recorded sales to minors took place, Mr. Kaki is still regretful of those incidents. Again, as a father himself, he would never want sales of vape and vape products to minors to occur. Mr. Kaki also realized through those occurrences the importance of having a manager oversee the operations of the business while he is unable to do so. As a result of those incidents, and to ensure the health and safety of the community moving forward, Mr. Kaki hired a full-time employee and conducted a stringent background check, including a thorough review of her references. Upon hiring this individual, Mr. Kaki trained her directly and required that she strictly follow the store operations policy that he has created. The store operations policy explains to staff how to check identification, when to check identification, and how to spot fraudulent identification to ensure that no sales of tobacco products are sold to minors and that no cannabis sales take place. Mr. Kaki had instructed the newly appointed manager of the store to enforce this store operations policy strictly and to monitor and ensure that other staff members are following the same requirements. However, unfortunately, the new manager, Julia, contracted COVID-19 during the week leading up to October 1st, 2021. And as a result, the new employee did not request, the new employee that made the sale did not request identification during a sale that took place on October 1st, 2021. Although Mr. Kaki endeavors to be continuously involved in Planet Rock, his health over the years and ensuring the health and safety of his elderly mother has impacted his ability to do so. And as a result of the most recent incident on October 1st, 2021, Mr. Kaki has realized that it's not possible for Planet Rock to continue selling vape and vape products because he is unable to manage the store on a day-to-day basis to ensure that sales to minors do not take place. So Mr. Kaki has not ordered additional nicotine products, vape products, and intends to not order any additional nicotine products or vape products moving forward. Again, he's regretful of the incidents that have occurred and does not want these incidents to occur again. So he has made the decision to cease selling vape and vape products. On October 26, 2021, the city had inspectors attend Planet Rock to ensure that all vape and vape products have been removed from the premises pending the hearing that's taking place today. And Mr. Kaki has confirmed that he will not be bringing those vape and vape products back to the store. So we'd like to move forward with questions for Mr. Kaki.
Just put the microphone on. Before we do that, just, proceeding in order here, do you have any witnesses that you're planning to call?
Yes, we should have a witness that has attended by WebEx. I'm not sure if she's in there, but I've sent her the link this morning.
Typically, we would hear from you and the witnesses, and then that will enable panel members to have fulsome information to ask their questions.
But is the witness present on the WebEx? Julia. Julia? Yes, she is? Okay.
Okay,
So-
just before we proceed, if you just give me a moment, we are approaching 12 o'clock, which was our time scheduled for this. So in order to continue past noon, I would need a motion from
Motion to extend
panel
to
members to
complete
extend.
the business.
Motion to extend from Councillor Fry, seconder. I'm hearing Councillor Hardwick, so I'll second that.
I'm here, sorry, I was on mute. Second.
Seconded by Councillor Hardwick. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Okay, sorry, Council, please go ahead. And Clerk, we do have the witness available now on the WebEx. Is that correct? Okay, so if you'd like to, Council, if you'd like to introduce your witness, and go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to introduce the new manager, Julia Patch. She's been working at Planet Rock since July of 2021, and she'll corroborate essentially a statement that Planet Rock will no longer be selling vape or vape products.
Yeah.
Okay. Julia, initially when you were hired by Mr. Kaki, what was your role and what did it move into?
So I was hired just as a general employee, mainly doing organization of products. Like there's a bunch of stock in the back and in the store that was just fairly unorganized. So I was hired to organize that. And then it quickly turned into like a manager position, um, just because it was like needed in the store.
And Julia, what's your role as the manager at the store?
So basically, just like helping customers. I do send suggestions for ordering, um, opening up shop, doing cash out, um, and stuff like that. We haven't hired any new employees, but if we were to hire new employees, I would be responsible for training them as well.
And the employee that had made a sale to a minor on October 1st, 2021, is he a newer employee than yourself?
Not, no, he's hired after me, but he was hired before I was a manager. So I did not train him.
And during that week, or on October 1st, 2021, is it true that you contracted COVID-19 and were unable to
Yes.
manage the store? Mhm.
Yes, I was. I had COVID and I was gone for 2 weeks.
And were you instructed to identify anyone that appears as minors when they're trying to purchase vape or vape products?
Yes, we need to identify them and ask them for 2 pieces of ID.
And what's your
And
background in terms of managerial experience?
I used to manage a bong shop, cannabis culture bong shop on Hastings and Canby. So I do have a previous knowledge of how to ID people and what to look for and to not serve minors.
And were you in attendance on October 25th or 26th of 2021 when all the vape products were cleared out?
Yes,
And you witnessed all the vape products being cleared out?
yes.
And can you please advise the panel what Mr. Kaki has informed you about the status of vape and vape products moving forward?
The status, so we are no longer selling the products at all. So everything's been taken off the premise and we're not selling vape products whatsoever.
And has he informed you whether or not you will be selling vape products in the future?
He has said we're not going to sell vape products in the future.
Thank you. Those are my questions for Julia.
Great, thank you, the witness, and thank you to counsel. So at this point, we do have the opportunity for any of the panel members to ask any questions for the witnesses. Do panel members have any questions at this point?
I think the counsel for the city has an opportunity to ask Ms. Patch some questions based on her
Oh,
directive.
yes, sorry, I was just looking through here and I didn't see that on my script, but thank you, counsel. Do you have questions at this point?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Ms. Patch, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry that
Yeah.
that you had COVID. Over what 2-week period were you off work?
So the first 2 weeks of October.
First 2 weeks of October.
So yes, I think I contracted COVID on September 27th. And then I was out for about 2 weeks.
And were you the manager of the store at that time?
Yes.
And who did you directly report to as your superior?
Al.
Al. And so who minded the shop and managed it in your absence?
Al would have been responsible.
Al was at the store during that 2-week period?
Um, Again, like I wasn't able to come into the shop, so I really don't know. But I believe Al and the other employee mayor covered my hours.
Okay. In effect, the sale to the minor on October 1st happened on Al's watch. Is that fair to say?
No, I don't think Al was in the shop, so I'm pretty sure that mayor was the one that made the sale.
Well, you weren't there. You were the manager, and in your
Yes,
absence,
but
Al was in charge, right?
yes, like he was doing scheduling and like taking over my duties.
Okay. Are you responsible for the website, the upkeep of the website at all?
No, I don't have knowledge in how to operate a website, so I've been trying to get somebody to redo the website because everything on there is quite not updated.
Do you know when the last time it was updated?
No, it hasn't been updated since my hiring for sure.
Okay. And how long have you been looking for somebody to update the website?
We're trying to get someone to handle all of our social media and everything like that. So we've only really been looking for a couple weeks
A couple
to
of
get
weeks.
somebody to do that. Yeah, because yeah, we're going through a bunch of changes at the moment. So
Okay,
we
so
have
you've
to.
been trying to do that for a couple of weeks, but it's been the same information on the website since you were hired in July.
Yeah, yeah. So we're making a bunch of business changes. So
You're aware
that
what's up.
on our list.
You're aware what's up on the website right now.
I haven't looked the website too much, honestly.
Too much, but you have looked at it.
Yeah, like I quickly looked at it, but I haven't looked at, like, I haven't gone through everything. Wasn't aware that all that was advertised on the website.
All that was advertised. Well, I've got it up in front of me right now, and the
Yeah.
business is still under Planet Rock Smoke Shop
Yeah.
.business.site is still being advertised as a vapor shop. You agree with that?
Yeah, I guess it's still being advertised, but again, the website's very like hasn't been updated in a long time.
Okay. It also
So
says that you're offering various seeds for sale and much more.
I I was completely unaware of, and I definitely have not seen any seeds of any kind in the shop.
I'm just saying what's up on the website. You agree that that's
Yeah,
what's being advertised on the website?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. You've said that you've
Yeah,
seen the website.
I again, like I did not know that that was on the website.
You didn't know that there were photographs of seed packages still up on the
No,
website?
I didn't. No. Again, I haven't looked at the website really in depth.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Great, thank you, counsel, and thank you to the witness. At this point, panel members, do you have any questions for the witness? Okay, seeing none at this point, thank you. And we now have an opportunity for closing submissions, commencing with the City of Vancouver Council. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Are there any further witnesses, Ms. Finn?
Point of privilege, Chair, I do have a question.
Okay, just hold tight for one moment, please, Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you.
Just going to ask the Business License Holders Council if you don't plan to call any further witnesses. You had just mentioned you had the one. Is that correct?
Yes, I had the one. Mr. Kaki wanted to just make a few statements, if that's fine with the procedures, or
Okay, well, let's proceed with questions first from Councillor Hardwick, because she had a question for the witness, for Ms. Patch. So, Councillor Hardwick, go ahead, please.
Why would employees be motivated to sell vaping products to minors? It's been stated that this is that the sale of vaping products was not done with the knowledge and consent of the business. So what would compel employees to sell these products to minors? Are they being paid on an hourly rate? Do they get commission? What would be their motivation to do so when it was prohibited?
That I really have no idea. I've never encouraged sales to minors nor have sold to minors myself. We're not on a commission basis. We're paid hourly, so I don't know why anyone would be compelled to sell to youth or anyone that's underage. Um, Again, like since me being hired, I haven't sold to anyone that has been underage, and I practice checking ID. Also, we haven't like sold anything like seeds. Like I've never seen on the premise. I haven't seen any marijuana products on the premise whatsoever. Um, So yeah, I really don't have any idea why anyone would be compelled to sell to anyone underage.
Well, okay, I'll leave it at that because that's contradicting to what the evidence has shown that this has taken place. And what I'm trying to establish is why this has been done since the owner
That
and yourself
that
are saying that
I
it's
don't
not.
know why it would have been done. Like honestly, like I don't know why anyone would be compelled to. Again, like I said, I have not sold to anyone underage, and I am there most of the time. So, um, but I cannot speak on behalf of past employees or anything like that.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your answer.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hardwick, and thank you to Julia Patch. That is final questions. So back to the licensees council. You said that Mr. Kaki wishes to make some remarks?
No, sorry, he's not going to be making any remarks. We're just going to move to conclusions.
Okay. All right, then we will commence the closing submission with the City of Vancouver's council at this point. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I think I can be relatively brief. Panel has heard the evidence with respect to the ongoing activities at the premises. This isn't just about the sale of vaping products to minors. It's also about the sale, unlicensed, unregulated sale of cannabis products from the premises. It resulted in a resource-intensive undercover operation leading to the seizure of illegal drug products. The concern, I think, was articulated well by our Chief License Inspector, that when you take a look at the complaints, you take a look at the investigation, you take a look at what was seized at the premises, and you take a look at the statements made by the licensee, that this is a pattern of behavior. We have what appears to be an absentee business owner who is deferring the running of the business to employees and foisting, I think, his poor business practices onto them or using them as an excuse. But what we've heard today, also from VPD most notably, is that 2 of the sales of those cannabis products came directly from the licensee himself. And we don't have an answer to that. He hasn't given us any evidence to the contrary. So I think that this panel needs to take into account that although he's pointing the finger at his employees for the poor business practices, for the illegal sale to minors, for the illegal sale of cannabis product, that he's complicit in this. He supervises the activities. We've heard just from his witness that that he's the one who minded the shop in her absence. And lo and behold, October 1st, we have a repeat of a failed compliance check, notwithstanding this manual or new policies that are put in place to ensure such things don't happen. The submissions of the Chief License Inspector are that she has no faith that this business can be run in such a way that there will be no longer violations under various regulations, including the sale of such product to minors. This panel needs to decide whether it accepts the licensee's submissions in the face of litany of evidence to the contrary. The Chief License Inspector is suggesting the revocation of the license based on the history, based on her concerns, and that's the position that's being put forward today. We are asking that the license be revoked.
Okay, thank you for the concluding remarks. And now we'll provide the same opportunity for closing submissions by the licensee's counsel. Please go ahead.
In addition to my closing statements, Mr. Kaki would like to make some closing statements as well, if that's allowed. So he'll speak first.
Hi. I regret that what's happened, and I regret that's what's happened, and unfortunately, I've relied on my employees and my past managers to give me information. And like I said, a lot of businesses are run through their managers, and they depend on their managers to give them proper information. And that's what I thought I was doing, is when I hired my managers, that they would give me proper information. This is my livelihood. I would not do anything blatantly to, that I would get my license revoked, my business shut down, knowingly. I relied on my managers to give me information. They told me that was okay, this was okay, regarding seeds, and that up to now, businesses are selling seeds in Vancouver. I made few phone calls yesterday. So we do a little bit of research, and that's what my managers do, and they check to see if these things are sold, and then we base some decisions on that. And that's what some of the decisions were based on. Is the other stores are still selling them? They're bought from companies that are legally in Vancouver. Other than that, all I can say is I'm very sorry. I am taking more active. I had hired a professional manager this time. The last incident that happened when my manager was sick is I was there for a few days, and we had hired a new employee, and he did not bother to check, unfortunately. So from that day on, I decided I'm not going to sell any vape products because I did not want any more issues, problems. So from that day on, I just stopped selling the vape products. I do not carry them anymore. We've had the city inspectors come in, and I don't mind them coming in if they want to check once in a while, but we're not going to sell vape products. Whatever I have, I'm just going to throw them away, take a loss, but it's not worth any more headaches for me, because it's been really stressful for me, for all the incidents that happened. And I've been doing my best to hire proper employees, and I think this time I have hired proper employees, and we're keeping on top. But there are certain issues that we've had in the past, which I thought we're not going to sell those products anymore. So that should eliminate that, and that's all I have to say.
So in conclusion, given that it was the city's concern that vape and vape products will continue to be sold to minors, in addition to cannabis products being sold in general, in considering the revocation of Mr. Kaki's business license, it's our request that the city overturns the decision of the chief licensing inspector rather than revoke his business license, as Planet Rock does not pose a safety risk to youths or the community at large. Mr. Kaki will no longer sell vape or vape products to youth, nor will any cannabis sales take place. Again, Mr. Kaki, unfortunately, at the time, due to his medical issues and taking care of his aging mother, he relied on employees. But he has since learned that that's not an available option for him any longer. So he's taken a much more hands-on approach. It's not possible for the store to sell vape products, vape products or cannabis products, given that it's not in the store any longer, and he's not going to be restocking those materials. And in terms of a history of non-compliance, there was only one incident in 2011 in terms of showing a history of that. And since he had received the suspension back in 2011, there were no other incidents of stolen goods being sold. So clearly, just a suspension would cause Mr. Kaki to understand that these are very strict and serious punitive measures, and he won't make the same infractions again. So again, alternatively, if the city intends to provide some punitive measures against Mr. Kaki, then we would respectfully submit that at most a 2-week suspension take place, as a lengthier suspension would be detrimental to Mr. Kaki's business. Again, due to COVID-19, Mr. Kaki's business has taken a steep downturn, and Mr. Kaki's lease payments to his landlord are currently in arrears. He more recently was able to make a small payment towards the lease in arrears, and his landlord has not been able to evict him due to the government policies. But with restrictions lifting, if Mr. Kaki is unable to continue to make payments towards his lease currently in arrears, he believes that his landlord's patience will wear thin, and that an eviction and the closure of Planet Rock would be imminent. Furthermore, Planet Rock's closure would not serve the community at large, as numerous businesses along Granville Street have closed due to COVID-19. Between Smythe and Nelson Street, the stores with addresses 942, 946, 558, 968, 970, 972, 980, 998 are not in operation. Between Nelson and Helmkin Street, the stores with addresses 1033, 1047, 1059, 1063, and 1071 have closed. And between Helmkin and Davie Street, 1109 and 1167 have closed. This is a total of 15 stores between a 3-block span along Granville Street that are either empty or are not in operation. If a suspension were to occur, it would be likely that if a lengthier suspension were to occur, or a revocation of his business license were to occur, it would likely be that Planet Rock will be another empty storefront along Granville Street. In summary, Mr. Kaki is hoping for an opportunity to show that he has remedied the situation to ensure that Planet Rock continues to contribute to the character of the community and does not end up another empty storefront on a once bustling area along the Granville Street. Thank you. Those are our submissions.
Great, thank you for the submission and closing remarks. So panel, at this point, we're moving on to decision and discussion by the panel. So the panel has the opportunity to discuss it. And just by way of reminder, when the panel moves to decision, you have 3 options in front of you. One, to uphold the chief license inspector's recommendation, to set aside that recommendation, or to set it aside and attach conditions to the license. So put yourself on the queue if you'd like to discuss the matter. And Councillor Fry, I have you first. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I'd actually like to move the motion, the proposal to uphold the Chief License Inspector's recommendations.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to uphold the chief license inspector's recommendation. And do we have a seconder for that?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Hardwick. If there is any discussion.
I have a few comments I'd like to add,
Councillor Fry?
if I may.
Please go ahead.
I do see, I appreciate the submissions from everybody who's joined us here today. I do see a pretty obvious pattern of noncompliance here, multiple misrepresentations by the proprietor, multiple failed compliance checks, multiple sales to minors. And I believe that this has eaten up a lot of resources on the city side, on Vancouver Coastal's health side, on the police department side. You know, I note that the website, despite it being inaccessible, the Wayback Machine Internet Archive shows that it was updated on January 26, 2021 to change the hours of operation, which were at that point listed to be open until 2 a.m. on weekends. So clearly there was an opportunity to go in and update the website and remove some of these kind of pieces, and that was an opportunity that was not availed. So I don't take a lot of the submission that there was no opportunity to update the website as accurate. I'm also extremely concerned when I see the additional items that aren't a source of the complaint here, but when I see knives, bear spray, baggies, scales being sold, I think that establishes a whole other pattern that were this license to be continued, I would feel strongly that it should be further investigated, because I don't think that's the kind of business that is helpful, especially when it's pandering and catering to young people. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. I don't see, I'm going to put myself to make a couple of comments. I don't have too much to add to Councillor Fry's remarks other than to concur. And I think there was two distinct things that we heard in the submissions today. And that was not simply about selling to minors, but also the sale of products for which the licensee did not have a business license. And so in hearing even directly from the licensee that, he would, quote, take a loss on some of the product and sort of dump or sort of get rid of that, to me just lends credence to the sort of contraventions that have been brought forward. I would also concur that a great deal of resources has been spent on this, and it is uncommon for the City of Vancouver to revoke a business license and takes that decision often quite seriously. And often will work and use best practices to work with the licensee to move forward. So I'm not compelled by the commentary that I heard from the licensee with respect to what appeared to be an abdication of responsibility, because ultimately as a business owner, you are responsible, and this has happened over a period of time. I do appreciate it's a significant decision in terms of impacting someone's livelihood, but I think that it's a pretty significant impact that the activities in question have had with respect to a number of people in the community that are vulnerable, and as Councillor Fry had alluded to, it was a pattern of behavior. So for that reason, I will support the motion on the floor and uphold the Chief License Inspector's recommendation. Councillor Carr, before we move, or Councillor, sorry, Hardwick, before we move to a vote, do you have any comments? Or are you okay at this time?
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay. If I can ask the clerk to take us to a vote, please. If I can get a vote assist in favor, clerk. Okay, so that motion has passed. The recommendation of the Chief License Inspector has been upheld with a unanimous vote in support of that motion. So that concludes the business of the panel today. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick, seconded by Councillor Fry. All in favor? That's unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for your time and efforts this morning. We are adjourned.